Nancy Pelosi bites the hand that feeds her in the mainstream media on MSNBC, and it's so beautiful to watch because the Democrats are becoming unhinged right now because they can see that Joe is losing, and he's losing bad. We're going to show all that to you, all the meltdowns, all the rants. Morning Joe trying to take these Columbia protests and say, oh, it's really about the MAGA fascist on January 6th. Unbelievable. Do you want Kamala to be your mamala? Well, we'll explain what that even means. And if you're looking to protest and take up shop in an encampment on a college campus, you better make sure that you don't have a governor from the Republican Party in the state house, because in red states, they don't play that. All that and a whole lot more. My name's Larry O'Connor. We're brought to you by the Electronic Payments Coalition, and you can call me Larry. Thank you for watching live right now on Rumble and joining our very lively chat group there in the comments section during our live streams. It's awesome. If you're watching us after the fact, where the heck are you? Come on back at noon. We're here every day, pretty much. Also, if you're watching us after the fact on whatever video platform you're watching, please like us and subscribe. And even more importantly, frankly, at this point, share us with other people. If you like what you see, share it with people in your life that you know will also like it too. Even better, share it with someone who will probably not like it, because that'll start a lively conversation. Like the lively conversation they have every morning on MSNBC. They call the show Morning Joe, and I guess they mean Joe Scarborough, who used to be a Republican, believe it or not. But then he moved to New York. He got a job on MSNBC. He fell in love with a blonde babe. Let's just go with it. Who comes from a long line of Democrats. And suddenly, well, Joe sings a different tune. Now, they know very well that these protests are harming the Democratic Party. They know very well that the last poll shows an overwhelming, and I mean overwhelming majority of Americans are on the side of Israel. They hate these protesters. They hate what they stand for. In fact, a majority of Americans right now want Israel to finish the job, and we know what that means in rooting out Hamas from Gaza. So what's Morning Joe going to do? Well, they're going to whine, they're going to complain, and they're going to say, but January 6th.
Richard, to your point, I think that's the place we've all been sitting in watching this going, what the hell is going on? What are these universities doing? Why aren't they doing something? And I'll echo the horror that this does look like January 6th. What a terrible example for our students. At the same time, these are young adults. And the question is, why do you choose to learn about the complexities of other situations around the world? But this one, you want to set up an encampment. This one, you want to scare people. This one, you want to come to the edge of violence or even go to violence.
Not the
this
edge.
one,
They're
you risk your future and your education for. See, I think these college students obviously are missing the part where they need to see what's going on across the country with these protests, that it's now in the realm of violence. It's in the realm of hatred, whether some are peaceful or not. They need to watch the news and look at all the different arguments and be adults, or start learning to be adults, and set up discussions and debates across college campuses, or their colleges or universities are going to have no choice but to expel them and ruin their future, the impact they want to have on the community, society, and the world at some point. But let's then go to the hard part of this. What is the solution for college university presidents and deans who want to maintain control but also preserve free speech?
What a fascinating juxtaposition of ideas that you just heard from the brilliant mind of Mika Brzezinski. And by the way, the answer to that rhetorical question, which she thinks doesn't have an answer to it, which is what are college presidents supposed to do? We'll give you that answer a little later in the program, because if you're in a red state, the answer is pretty simple. You follow the law. But did you notice in that entire monologue there about how bad these protests were, not once was the actual issue raised or any concern raised about the broken moral compass of these dirtbags who are setting up illegal encampments, screaming anti-Semitic, death to Israel, death to the Jews chants. Not once did they say they're on the wrong side of this issue. Not once did they say they're siding with terrorists who just killed 1,200 innocent people 7 months ago and who continue to hold a couple hundred innocent people as hostage and sex slaves. Not once there. No, the concern is the future for these poor college students if they get expelled. And what's really underlying all of this discussion you're about to see is this is hurting us in the election. They're not actually against the sentiment of these dirtbags who were supporting, propping up, elevating, and running defense for terrorists. No, they're just worried that it's going to hurt them in November. Watch, there's more.
Look, it's part of Columbia's storied history to allow people to go in and illegally break into buildings.
To protest.
No. They're proud of illegally breaking into buildings and taking over presidents' offices in the 1960s. And you would think if that hung over them for 50 years, they would have been better prepared than.
Look,
yeah, and that's exactly what's happening here. You see, in the media, you've got these old boomers and Gen Xers, dinosaurs, who, and I'm a Gen Xer, but I was a Reagan Gen Xer, not some of these other loony Britons who thought Reagan was the problem. They are trying to bring back the band together. They want to get the whole band together and say, oh, this is great. This is just like 1968, baby. We got our campus protests. We're protesting Vietnam and the civil rights movement. And this is righteous. And I'm hip. I'm down with the young kids right in their 60s and 70s. Oh, just like I was when I was a kid. Yeah, what happened in 1968 again? Oh, that's right. One of the most unpopular men in American politics, Richard Nixon, won in a near landslide election because the American people saw exactly what was going on these campuses and said, I don't know what side everyone else is on, but I ain't on the side of the people who are breaking the law. I'm not on the side of the dirtbags who need a bath. But that's exactly what's happening with the Democrats right now. And Joe Scarborough, who's actually pointing this out, saying, guys, this is the problem. Again, this is all about the election in November. It has nothing to do with the principles. It has nothing to do with the values. Here they were, just a few days. Also, by the way, don't you love there where Mika had to talk Joe off the ledge? Well, they're mostly peaceful. What do you mean mostly peaceful? They're breaking into buildings. They're taking over offices. And this is just what these hippie dirtbags did back in the 60s. So a couple of days ago, they started to see the warning signs. They got to watch them again, talking about the growing protests. This is Joe and Mika, the canary in the coal mine, showing everybody this is going to be a problem for us. If we want to win, we got to stop Trump at all costs. You're not helping.
You've got to send funding to Ukraine because they're fighting for us. When you read about what is happening to Ukrainian soldiers captured by Russians, and then if they're brought home in a prisoner swap, they're put back out there 3 months later because that's all they got.
Just devastating.
Are you kidding me? I don't hear anything about that because
it doesn't involve Jews.
For the safety of the world.
It doesn't involve Jews. It doesn't involve Israel. Because if this were about Arabs dying, if this was about Palestinians dying, they would have shut down campuses when Assad was killing 500,000 Arabs. But not a word.
Colleges are places for education, for deeper understanding, for understanding these different problems around the world, and for debate, for empathy, for learning, for hearing each other.
Well, and by the way, Jonathan,
I want to pause there. We're gonna get to more, but I just want to say, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Mika Brzezinski's dad used to be in the Carter administration and helped engineer the peace accords between Egypt and Israel. It was the first major peace accord between a Middle Eastern, predominantly Muslim nation and the country of Israel. It was a huge deal. The Camp David Accords, look it up. Mika's dad was part of that. Okay, so they know better. They understand exactly what's going on here. But do you notice at the beginning there, why don't we see this for Ukraine? Don't you know what's happening in Ukraine? Honey, because this is about Jew hatred. This is about anti-Semitism. That's why Ukraine, they're in Europe. We can't care about them on a college campus. And this whole idea, college campuses are supposed to be about free and open debate and exploring ideas and embracing each other's differences and learning and trying to get together. Where the hell have you been, Blondie? I've got more to say about this because I don't want to get in the way of Morning Joe, but just so you know, there's been a problem on college campuses well before 3 weeks ago when these encampments set up. And sadly, and I'm on the side of the poor Jewish students who can't even make it to class or walk across campus solely because of their religion and because of their genetic makeup. It's disgusting. It's despicable. But let me be clear. Those same Jewish students are being oppressed right now who were seeing the hate on campus from the pro-Hamas protesters. Well, they were around when Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and Ann Coulter and Larry O'Connor couldn't speak on their campus. We couldn't even show up and give a speech in a nice civilized auditorium. They saw what was happening on the campus. Did they say anything then? But frankly, for all I know, they may have been part of the protests against conservative speakers. I mean, part of the theme of today's show is you're reaping what you sow, guys, including these two. These protesters, these people who are pro-Hamas, who are making encampments on college campuses right now, they've been emboldened and enabled by these guys. Who do you think watches MSNBC? All right, we'll go back to the
mirror. We'll let you take it from here. But, you take an issue. I can't think of an issue that requires more discussion, that requires more patience, that requires a greater understanding that two truths can be held at the same time. If these students actually had been taught over their lifetimes to actually engage in critical thinking. Because as we've done on this show, we have talked about. I love the revelation from our pal Joe Scarborough that what are they learning? It's like, thank you. We've been there. It's only when it hits them in the face that they realize none of these people have learned critical thinking. None of these people know what the hell they're talking about. And by the way, it's not just in colleges. This is our whole point. This is why we're angry at critical race theory as the driving force of the curriculum in public schools. That transgender issues and diversity, equity, and inclusion is the driving force behind curriculum instead of, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Joe, you're just now realizing that they haven't been taught critical thinking and they're just going with the mob like lemmings because it's the cool thing to do. Hey, Joe, 4 years ago, these exact same kids were protesting Trump and you loved them. These exact same kids were keeping any student who wears a MAGA hat from attending their class on campus, who said that language is violence, that words are hurting me. These are your pals, Joe. You loved them when they were on your side, and now you're suddenly realizing the monster you've created. There's more. Again, a few days ago. This is them figuring it out. It's finally starting to figure out. But again, ultimately, their problem is not the education problem. Their problem is not the kids. Their problem is not Israel. Their problem is all of this is adding up to crushing landslide defeat in November. And they're just now, and it's amazing to watch them reach the realization. Because this is stuff we've known. Watch.
To NBC News in 1968 about ongoing protests at the school in opposition to the Vietnam War.
I've got to say, it makes as much sense in 2024 having 18 or 19-year-old people running college campuses as it did in 1968, which is to say, doesn't make any sense at all. And you do wonder where the adults are, the adults that are supposed to be running the university, the amount of money that they are paid to educate students, and they can't allow students to go to class because a small subset of those students and outside agitators want to shut down the camp. Where are the adults? It's staggering. Not just to me. I know I'm a conservative. Not just to me, But to 90% of Americans, they want to know where the adults are at Columbia. They want to know where the adults are at Penn. They want to know where the adults are at Harvard. They want to know where the adults are at all of these college campuses where they're letting their students and outside agitators run across the campus, shut down debate, scream whenever anybody tries to talk reason to them, shout genocidal chants, hold up signs pointing to Jews saying Hamas's next victims, holding up signs talking about the final solution, chanting constantly from the river to the sea. You know what from the river to the sea is? If you don't, that's all right. Most of the students chanting it don't understand that they are chanting genocidal comments.
All right, joining us now.
They want to wipe out all Jews, and they want to destroy the state of Israel, and they want to kill Jews and push them. See, they are Hamas on college campuses when they chant that.
Some of them may not even know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the point.
But the adults there do.
Yes, they do.
And yet, this, by the way, this is a long time coming. This has been coming since the 1960s. And now the people that were burning down college campuses, the people that were taking over presidents' offices, those people are now on the faculty senate, trying to encourage these students to do the same. They helped elect Nixon. I guess they want to elect Donald Trump in 24. Good on you guys.
Okay, joining us now, staff writer at The Atlantic, George Packer.
All right, there you go. I think, honestly, maybe my favorite part of that is Joe Scarborough calling himself a conservative, by the way. Did you like how Mika, like every time she tried to chime in there, she was, know your place, Mika. Don't interrupt the big man. Where are the adults? My question for you is, do you think Joe has just come to this realization now that the people who are running the universities right now are the same people who were burning down campuses in 1968? Is this new to you, pal? If it is, where the hell have you been? Where are the adults? I've got news for you, Joe. The guy who lives in the house right behind you there, oh, that's right, I forgot. They're in their garage in Tampa. That's just a painting to fool everybody that they're in Washington. Pet peeve of mine. The guy who lives in that house, not only is he the adult who's on the same side as the protesters you're now decrying, but he wants to pay off all their student loans with your money. That's right. That's the best part of it. Joe Scarborough just went through 4 minutes of a monologue telling you everything that's wrong with college campuses and universities and how they're run and all the money they've got, yet at the same time celebrates that the guy who lives in that house wants to take money from hardworking Americans, some who don't even have college educations, or some who actually did the hard work and made sacrifices to pay for their own kids' college educations, let alone their own college education, wants to take their money and pay off the student loans of the very people who are burning down the campus today, screaming death to the Jews. And Joe has not quite put those numbers together yet. He's starting to put the pieces together a little bit, but he hasn't quite finished the picture. Did you hear the whole thing about they're saying from the river to the sea? Do you know what that means? They might not know what that means, but the adults do. Yes, the adults know what it means, and they agree. That's the point. Do they know what that means from the river to the sea? It almost sounds like Joe has been watching our show for the last few months. Maybe. But you heard the final sentiment there, the final most important part of this. You're going to get Donald Trump elected. That's why they're passionate. That's why they're angry. It has nothing to do with Israel. It has nothing to do with right or wrong. It has nothing to do with the fact that the Hamas, the people that these protesters are supporting and elevating and celebrating and singing songs to, murdered 1,200 innocent people and still continue to hold 200 slaves, prisoners, has nothing to do with it. He revealed it all right at the end. You're going to get Donald Trump elected. That said, one last moment from MSNBC here, because there is hope. There is hope because we, the people, still have a voice. We don't have to worry about the media reporting things that we need them to report. No, we go over their heads. We go under between their legs, so to speak. We've got direct-to-you streaming content like you're watching right now, and we still have our voices. And I want you to see how our voices are being heard, even on MSNBC, as Ken Delanian reports outside the Supreme Court. Is it about the immunity arguments that happen in the Supreme Court? Watch what happens when one of us, one of the people, one of the real Americans has their chance.
And by not taking it on an expedited basis, sort of taking it under regular order here, they've already created a significant delay here that means that this election case, however they rule, can't go to trial probably before the fall. And now we come to exactly what they're considering here, which is the question of whether a president has absolute immunity. And then there's a second question here, which is whether anything that Donald Trump is accused of would actually constitute a presidential act implicated in the immunity question. Yeah.
Just making sure you're okay. Is everything okay? We hear someone yelling.
Yeah, it's fine. We have a heckler here outside.
I've got to say, they obviously have been following the David Pecker testimony. They're yelling fake news, and they obviously want viewers to know that Donald Trump lied about JFK's assassination, tried to blame Ted Cruz. He's yelling fake news also because Donald Trump lied along with David Pecker. They worked together to lie about Ben Carson, to lie about Hillary Clinton. Fake news all around. So I want to thank him for actually
framing it
for us. We want to make sure you're okay, but also we want everybody watching to know that person screaming fake news, obviously talking about all the lies that Donald Trump perpetrated about Hillary Clinton and all of his opponents in 2020. Go.
Yeah, I got to give it context and frame that. Usually you're supposed to ignore a heckler. I love that are you going to be okay? Is it an insurrectionist? It's like they don't have security at these stand-ups in front of the Supreme Court. Also, don't we love it when Mika's wearing her house coat? It's a little chilly there in the garage in Florida. So she had to put on the house coat. Joe's in an actual jacket and tie, the swimming trunks underneath. Because again, they're in Florida in their garage. They're not in Washington, D.C. And Mika is a little chilly. So she put on the house coat. And boy, that's quite a ring that she's got. I love those two so much. Fake news. Well, clearly that person is talking about how the National Enquirer and Donald Trump lied about Ted Cruz. Hey, Joe, I hate to break it to you. That is Ted Cruz. He's okay with what Donald Trump said about him because he's got higher concerns right now about the future of our nation. If Ted Cruz is okay with the whole thing, how come Joe isn't? That was literally Ted Cruz standing there on the street yelling fake news at MSNBC. All right, maybe not, but it could have been. Listen, millions and millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards all the time. I know I do. I'm like, have you seen that website? What is it? The Points Guy? He's got great tips. I maximize and leverage my mileage, my points that I get from my airline credit card to the nth degree. And I get upgrades because of it. I get a ton of things because of it, right? And I bet you do stuff like that too with cashback rewards, with hotel points, all that stuff. Well, corporate mega stores right now, they want to take those rewards away. These are rewards that we use on groceries, on school supplies, on cashback to pay for gas and to help grow our small businesses. And of course, those miles we use to make great memories. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill is going to eliminate credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cashback. Lawmakers help corporate megastores line their pockets, and we, the American people, we pay for it. So tell your senator to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. It's awful. Go to handsoffmyrewards.com. Handsoffmyrewards.com. Tell them today, handsoffmyrewards.com. All right, so things are a little different in other states where these college protests try to pop up. It's pretty much just in blue states. In Florida, under the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis, they took charge and they cleared the campuses of these violent and unlawful protests. Now, Governor DeSantis was doing a press appearance, and he was asked by a reporter, how do you justify infringing on these students' civil and constitutional rights by squashing them with your goon squad and your police state? I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what the question was. Here's Governor DeSantis responding.
That's not what we've done in Florida at all. you have a right to support or not support Israel. That's the First Amendment. You don't have a right to pitch a tent in the middle of campus and commandeer some of the property. And so what we've seen is when students, and there haven't been that many in Florida. I mean, it's a much smaller compared to these others. But when you go and you're bringing a tent or something on like a campus lawn, you know what they did at Florida State and University of Florida? They turned the sprinklers on and said, okay, you want to have, so that's just how it's going to be. But it's about conduct, and it's about making sure you're doing the code of conduct. So you could say whatever you want about Israel, pro or con. What you don't have a right to do is commandeer property. You don't have a right to harass individual students or faculty members. In Columbia, they were blocking a Jewish professor from being able to cross into a building just because he was Jewish. They were targeting for that. That's different than having an opinion on something. And so, no, what we're doing is absolutely right. I think the University of Florida put out a statement yesterday saying, people can have the views that they want, but the University of Florida is not a daycare center like you or we're not going to be sitting there and
That's right. And that's exactly what we've seen in Florida. In fact, let me show you a scene from the University of Florida so you can see exactly what people on the left are complaining about. And again, this is the police reaction to the students who would not comply from the university rules, from the state law, and from direct orders and instructions from police officers. When you break the state law, when you break the rules and the guidelines from your university where you are there as a guest, and especially when you don't comply with the direct instruction from law enforcement, this is what happens.
Get off of me! Get off of me! Go ahead.
And that's exactly what should happen. It's a beautiful thing to behold. Do you notice how all the protesters are covering their faces? It's not because of the pandemic. That's not why. It's to hide their identity. I mean, I guess for some of the women there who have the keffiyeh scarf that they bought from Banana Republic, brand new shiny tag still hanging off of it. For when they cover their hair and cover their face, maybe it's sort of in honor of the burqas that oppressed women in the Middle East are forced to wear because of their pals, Hamas, and organizations and governments just like Hamas. But mostly it's to keep themselves from being doxxed, because every single one of these people should be arrested. They should all have a criminal record because of this behavior. And if it stands in the way of them getting a good job, hey, lesson learned. FOFA, right? Exactly how it should be. What keeps you from breaking the law? Exactly that. Ruining your life. And you heard Governor DeSantis allude to it, but here was the statement put out by the University of Florida. Is that big enough for you? Hang on, let me see if I can enlarge it a little. It's about the same size, isn't it? I just changed the size of the window. Brilliant job, Larry. This is a statement from the spokesperson, Steve Orlando. This is not complicated. The University of Florida is not a daycare, and we do not treat protesters like children. They knew the rules, they broke the rules, and they'll face the consequences. For many days, we've patiently told protesters, many of whom are outside agitators, that they were able to exercise their right to free speech and free assembly. And we also told them that clearly prohibited activities would result in a trespassing order from UPD, barring them from all university properties for 3 years, and an interim suspension from the university. For days, UPD patiently and consistently reiterated the rules. Today, individuals who refused to comply were arrested after UPD gave multiple warnings and multiple opportunities to comply. That's right. In fact, last week we showed you the statement the University of Florida put out. It was very clear. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. If you do any of the things that you can't do, you'll be expelled. That's what we're seeing now. That's how you handle people. It's called the rule of law. It's called clearly communicating to everyone. Here are the laws. If you violate them, everybody will pay the consequences and everyone will be treated the same. This is why so many of us are terrified by what's going on in this country, where it looks like there's two sets of rules. Look at all of these people on the media making apologies for the destructive nature of these violent protests. And yet, if you walk through a door on Capitol Hill on January 6th that was held open by a Capitol police officer, you're going to jail for years. And those same reporters who are freaking out about the violent protesters who are breaking the law on college campuses, that how dare you, you've got to let them do their thing. That's okay. But they're the same ones who were cheerleaders for what happened on January 6th, for arresting everyone. Oh, throw them all in jail forever because they're MAGA fascist insurrectionists. We over here on this side, we want everyone who broke the law to be treated the same, equally. That's it. That's the least you can ask for in the government who is governed at your permission. Think about it. This is your government. Our Constitution, our founding document starts with we the people. And in that document, we dictate to our elected officials exactly how this government is to run. And even more importantly, in the Bill of Rights, we dictate what our God-given rights are that the government cannot infringe upon. And embedded into that agreement, that compact that we make with the elected officials and the government that we set up that governs at our consent, we have allowed them in certain cases to arrest us, to take freedoms away from us. They can even, under certain circumstances, take our lives if appropriate. We have permitted that, but only under certain conditions. And one of those conditions, the most important condition, is that we are all treated equally and fairly under the law. And what we have seen over and over and over again is one side of the political equation gets away with murder. And I mean literally murder. And the other side, you step on the grass, you're going to jail for years. Screw your due process. We'll spy on you, in fact, illegally, and we'll rationalize it later. That's what's happening right now. And the protests are a perfect example of it. University of Florida and the state of Florida handled it exactly how you're supposed to handle it. Here are the laws. Here's what you can do under the law. Here's what you can't do under the law. And if you violate the law and you do the things you can't do, here's what the penalty will be. Everybody knows the rules now. Game on. And so there were arrests made. And I want to show you some of the lovely young college students who have been arrested in Florida. This is the University of Florida. They look fantastic, don't they? They always have the nose ring. Have you noticed? Or the colored hair. Sure. Oh, look at that. Isn't that Rainbow Bright from My Little Pony? I think it is. That's lovely. Oh, the dead eyes.
That one's kind of freaky.
Do you not like that one?
That one's just a little unsettling to me.
Is it the hair or the face? Or the whole package? The
soulless stare. The 30-yard soulless stare.
Those are the dead eyes. You don't want to see him, her in an alley. Are we guessing her?
They, them look terrifying to me.
There it is. Thank you, Kevin. Now, we've been mentioning Texas and Florida and Georgia, where the police have been empowered to do their job and to follow the law. Those are deep red states for the most part. But what about a more purpley state? What about a state that's been blue right up until the last governor's election, the state of Virginia, where Governor Glenn Youngkin is now in charge of such things on campus? Well, Governor Youngkin put out a statement yesterday saying across the Commonwealth, we've seen student and significant non-student participants. That non-student part is pretty important because a whole ton of these people on campus aren't even students. These are activists who are taking advantage of this situation, and they're protecting themselves under the guise of students' rights, even though they're literally not students. They throw projectiles at law enforcement. They violate the policies of our colleges and universities, obstruct and disrupt student life, and endanger public safety. And as a result of that, this is what it looked like on the campus of Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, in Richmond. That's right. That's Virginia. That's Virginia, a purple state, if not blue state, that has voted for Democrat president since every year since 2008. where both state senators, I suppose U.S. senators are Democrat. And up until this last election, like I said, a Republican has not held statewide office in years and years and years. So you're thinking Glenn Youngkin, he's a Republican and he's conservative, but he's also in a purple state. How's he going to handle this? This is how he's handling it. He called in the Virginia State Police and said, clear off that campus. And that's exactly what they did. And as conservative as Glenn Youngkin is, and I do believe he is a good governor and a good conservative, he's also a smart politician. And I assure you that he weighed whether this was the right thing to do in his state, and he reached the determination that it absolutely was. And that tells you politically, not only is this the right thing to do morally and legally, but it's the right thing to do politically as well. The lieutenant governor in Virginia, incredible woman, Winsome Sears, she's African-American, she's black, a Republican conservative. She wrote, when this was going down at VCU, when a peaceful protest causes extreme fear and becomes violent, there's nothing peaceful about it. History shows America has been down this road before when black people suffered greatly. We will not support those who cause Jews to feel absolute terror. You see what she did there? Don't you start throwing civil rights in the 60s back at me, pal. You want to be on the wrong side of history. Well, if you're on the wrong side of history, especially within the context of Martin Luther King and the civil rights era of the 60s, if you're on the side of people who were segregating Jews and screaming racial epithets at them because of their religion and their race. And Virginia, Winsome Sears is absolutely brilliantly correct about that. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the mayor of LA was doing an MSNBC interview mostly about the homeless crisis there. But then she was asked about the campus protests that we've seen pop up there, especially at UCLA.
Mayor Batts, before we let you go, I want to ask you about the scenes we're seeing, and we were just discussing at the top of our show at both UCLA and USC, these campus protests over the war in Gaza. How do you think the schools have handled them?
Well, I think both schools have handled them the best that they can. But I will tell you that right now, both USC and UCLA are peaceful. I know that the administration is talking to the protesters and trying to come to a peaceful resolution. So I feel good that we will get there.
Peaceful? Did you see the guy who got tased by one of the protesters? Did you see the Jewish students who were blocked from even entering campus because they're Jewish? Peaceful? I will say this about UCLA. There is one difference. I've been to UCLA. My kid went to UCLA. I know the campus very well. It's huge. It's a giant quad. Unlike Columbia, where it's like, one little New York City block. We're talking over a mile long, this quad. Not easy to walk through because it's LA. They got lots of space, right? Or at least they did when they established UCLA. And so the protesters couldn't take up the entire space. So what's happened is pro-Israel protesters have taken up camp right outside of the Hamas zone. Some brilliant pro-Israel benefactor or philanthropist, I should say, has invested in a giant outdoor scoreboard type video display, rolled it up right outside the encampment, and they play on a loop, full blast volume, the video of the October 7th terror attacks, the selfie video made by the Hamas terrorists bragging about the rape and murder of innocent people. They play it over and over again, saying this is what Intifada looks like. This is what you're supporting, you dirtbag scum. That is one difference about UCLA. It's not peaceful, but at least the pro-Israel side is having their say, and they're taking a stand. There's a huge Jewish population in Southern California, and they're showing up every day. In fact, take a look at this video. This shows you everything you need to know. See all that plywood that's been set up right there in front of the main auditorium, Royce Hall at UCLA, the iconic twin spires of Royce Hall. On the other side of that plywood, that disgusting dark-looking wall that they've put up. By the way, I love that they love walls now. On the other side of their wall, that's the pro-Hamas encampment, right? And they want to keep people out that they put up a wall. I thought walls didn't work. They finally found a wall that they embrace. So that's the despairing, disgusting, everyone cover your face side of the UCLA campus where it's full of pro-Hamas protesters. Now, watch what happens when you pan your camera over to the students who were celebrating the state of Israel. Yeah, what side do you want to be on? What side do you want to be on? You've got one side covering their faces in their little burqa keffiyeh scarves, not to keep the virus out, but to protect themselves and to bully and intimidate. But they're also covering their faces because of the inherent shame that they know deep down in their soul they should feel, because they know they're on the wrong side of this. But they're participating because they think it's righteous. And they're on the side of the cool kids. But this side, the light side, they're proud of their faces. They want the world to see who they are as they stand by the only real functioning democracy in the Middle East, as they stand by the people who were the victims of the murderous October 7th attacks. They show their faces because they're proud of the fact that their face is a true reflection that they were created in the image of God. What side do you want to be on? One more bit at UCLA, because I want to leave this segment on a positive note. Here's one of the students. This student has actually sort of gone viral several times because wearing the Israeli flag as a superhero cape, he has confronted these protesters face to face. In fact, he was so effective in doing so that the protesters, have physically kept him from entering the campus that he pays tuition to be on. Well, he took to the podium in front of that giant screen that was set up, and here's what he had to say.
Over the last couple of weeks, we have witnessed pro-Hamas protesters setting up encampments all over the country. While they cower behind their masks and hide who they are, we stand tall and proudly and voice our message to the world. Israel is not going anywhere. The Jewish people are not going anywhere.
And I ask you again, what side do you want to be on? I know what side I want to be on. Well, on MSNBC the other day, yesterday, we saw a complete and total, utter, destructive, tear-filled, blind-raged meltdown. We begin with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi was does it get any friendlier than this? Nancy Pelosi on the set of MSNBC interviewed by Katie Tur. And she's trying to make the point that I'll sum up the entire interview in this way. Trump bad, Biden good. Vote for us. And they think it's going to work again. So was she on there to talk about how great our national security is? Nope. Can't. Was she there to talk about how great our foreign relations are right now? Can't. Was she there to talk about how we've got immigration and our southern border under control? Don't make me laugh. Was she there to talk about how things are so much better now because the price of goods and services are so much more affordable than before Joe Biden took over? Please. 12 to 20% compounded inflation over the last 3 years? No way. What about the housing market? Have you seen interest rates recently? No. She can't say any of that. Can she say that it's safe for you now to walk in a major city at any time of day, or to walk in her city of San Francisco without stepping in human feces, jumping over human debris of a criminal vagrant living on the street, or God forbid you fall down and hit yourself on a used hypodermic needle that's been left on the street? No, she can't say any of those things. So the only message is Trump is a monster. And watch what happens when Katie Tur gives her the slightest, the very slightest of pushback on her false narrative. Watch.
There's nothing in his performance, if that's the word we'll use, what he has done, that would indicate that he cares, prioritizes, or ever valued or did anything to support a democracy. And now on the ballot saying he should have immunity from whatever he might do. I mean, really, I have sympathy and respect for everybody who votes. I'm glad people vote. I know some of them will always reject those of us who might look different to them in leadership or the rest, and that's that. But there are those who have real legitimate concerns about immigration, globalization, innovation, and what does that mean for their job and their family's future? And we have to address those concerns. And Joe Biden is doing that, created 9 million jobs in his term in office. Donald Trump has the worst record of job loss of any president. So we just have to make sure people know.
That was a global pandemic.
He had the worst record of any president. We've had other concerns in our country. If you want to be an apologist for Donald Trump, that may be your role, but it ain't mine. And he has the worst.
Anybody can accuse me of that.
But let me just say, as a Speaker of the House, we put forth a $3 trillion bill. $3 trillion of investment in communities and the rest, and that stimulates the economy.
Oh, yeah. Don't you feel stimulated by all that money? It's what caused the inflation, and she's bragging about it. But was that not glorious? Can we just watch this again? And I'm going to break it down as Larry does, because there's a lot that I want to say. I can't tell you the discipline it took to not interrupt that clip, but I knew it was a minute and a half, and I knew we'd have time to go through it together. So let's do it together.
There's nothing in his performance, if that's the word we'll use, what he has done, that would indicate that he cares, prioritizes, or ever valued or did anything to support a democracy. And now on the ballot saying he should have immunity from whatever he might do. I mean, really.
You know, this is why Nancy Pelosi won't accept an interview with me. I would love to interview Nancy Pelosi or any major Democrat who tries to parrot this. The fact that he thinks he should have immunity for anything he might do. May I ask you, Madam Speaker, just real quickly, because I know you're a Democrat, you're an FDR Democrat. I've heard you call yourself an FDR Democrat, right? Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt rounded up American citizens of Japanese descent. They were rounded up purely because of their race and their ethnicity. And these were American citizens, even American citizens that were born here in this country. They could have been multi-generational, but because they were of Japanese descent, Franklin Roosevelt rounded them up, forced them to sell all of their possessions, took them from their homes, and put them in prison camps, hundreds of miles away from where they were for years during World War II. Should he have had immunity from that? And if so, why? Now, I want you to know, I think that FDR should have had immunity for that decision. It was the wrong decision. It was a terrible decision. History has judged him for that, sort of. Just like how Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War, unilaterally as the commander-in-chief, but it was wartime. And he made the decision, just like FDR did, that he felt he had to do that. And he should have been immune from any criminal prosecution for doing that as well. If you don't want to go all the way back to the FDR days, Madam Speaker, since, you were, 60, 70 years old back in the 40s? Let's do something more recent. Barack Obama, third day in office, ordered a drone strike, killing innocent civilians without any due process. It took them years to even admit to it and then ask forgiveness. American citizens were killed by Barack Obama via drone strike, without any due process, without any arrest, let alone a prosecution or a trial. They were killed by Barack Obama, and he called it while he was using his war powers as commander-in-chief. Should he have had immunity from any criminal or civil penalties because of that? And I know you think he should have, so explain why. Because clearly you're in favor of some level of immunity. So the question now is, where does that immunity begin and end? Because Donald Trump, as president, believed that he was protecting the Constitution from a fraudulent election. You may disagree with him, just like people disagreed with FDR, with Japanese internment, just like people disagreed with Abraham Lincoln over habeas corpus, and just like people disagreed with Barack Obama over the drone strikes. Disagree all you want, but that's what he believed. Why should he not have immunity, but all those other presidents have immunity? I'll give you as much time as you'd like to answer that question. Please, Madam Speaker, go. This is why I'm never allowed to interview Nancy Pelosi. But there's more.
I have sympathy and respect for everybody who votes. I'm glad people vote. I know some of them will always reject those of us who may look different to them in leadership or the rest, and that's that. But there are those.
What does that even mean, by the way? I respect everybody who votes, and then she uses this gesture. But I know some of them, that's you, by the way. That's me. Some of them, they'll reject us every time because of the way we look. Well, I mean, the joke tells itself. But it's not because of how you look, Nancy, I promise you. It's because your ideas are contrary to the vision of our nation. But that's fine.
Who have real legitimate concerns about immigration, globalization, innovation, and what does that mean for their job and their family's future? And we have to address those concerns. And Joe Biden is doing that, created 9 million jobs in his term in office. Donald Trump has the worst record of job loss of any president. So we just have to make sure people know.
That was a global pandemic.
All right. So, and I do love it. And like I said, the slightest of pushbacks. In fact, I don't even think Katie Tur believes that it's an excuse for job loss, that it was a pandemic. I think she was just sort of doing a devil's advocate. Almost like, well, what do you say to the people who say that Trump's job loss was because of the pandemic and it wasn't his economic policies? You know, in other words, what do you say to the people who believe the facts and the truth? Because we all know what the economy was like and the jobs market was like before the pandemic. We all know it. In fact, some would argue that that's why we had a pandemic. Because it was an election year and things were going a little too well. So Katie Tur does this devil's advocate thing and says, well, you know, it was a global pandemic. And look at her face. Her first reaction is this: the shock and the fire-breathing, blood coming out of the eyes rage that you would even say that. And what is her response? Here, this is my favorite part of this entire thing. That this is her opportunity to shoot that down. Oh, a pandemic. Oh, let me explain exactly why you can't blame the pandemic. And what's her response? What's her answer to that?
He had the worst record of any president. We've had...
To basically say the exact same talking point, but slower, louder, and angrier. That's it. That's all we got. He had the worst jobs record of any president. Well, it was a pandemic. He had the worst jobs record. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And then she goes on to call Katie Tur a Trump apologist. Katie Tur on MSNBC is Trump apologist. Let me explain exactly what that was. That has nothing to do with Katie Tur. Nancy Pelosi saying, if you want to be a Trump apologist, you go ahead. That was a warning shot. That was a signal. That was a flag being sent up the flagpole. It was the red flare being shot up so everybody could see. That was for Anderson Cooper. That was for George Stephanopoulos. That was for Kristen Welker. That was for whoever's on CBS these days, because who watches CBS? That was for Jake Tapper. That was for every other journalist or host of a TV show across the board. Don't you go there. Don't you even try it. You dare to try to equivocate the economy and say that the only problem with Trump's economy and the problems that we had in that final year of the economy was because of the pandemic, you might as well be a Trump apologist. That was to preempt the next one. That's what that was. Let's see. Let's see if anybody dares to go there. Let's see if anybody dares to actually say the obvious, logical truth. That things were great until the pandemic. The pandemic was China's fault. The lockdown was Anthony Fauci's fault and Andrew Cuomo's fault and the media's fault for forcing it because they were sure that people are going to die if not for you. And now, if you dare to say, you know, in retrospect, we shouldn't have had the lockdown and that wasn't really Trump's fault, you're an apologist. You're a Trump apologist. And you will never work in this town again. This tactic is all they've got. But there's even more great meltdown. I mean, that's pretty good. But then you turn to the host of Nicole Wallace's show. Nicole Wallace, whose last claim to fame before she had this show on MSNBC was she was the brilliant mind behind convincing John McCain that Sarah Palin's first one-on-one exclusive interview should be with Katie Couric. That's who this is. It was her idea. And why did she give the interview to Katie Couric? Because Katie Couric was her old roommate. We're pals. She's not a partisan Democrat hack. She's going to play it right down the middle, fair and square. That's Nicole Wallace, who I believe, along with Steve Schmidt, the guy who ran the McCain campaign, who's like, he's Project Lincoln, right? He's Lincoln Project. He's like right there with Rick Wilson. Those two, I believe, and I'll never be able to prove it, so it's just an opinion. Go ahead and sue me. Nicole Wallace and Steve Schmidt, they sabotaged the John McCain campaign. It was always going to be a tough one for McCain against Obama. But I think there was a lane you could win it. And I think they sabotaged it. I think that they made more money by McCain losing than they would have by McCain winning. I mean, just look at her now and look at the money the Lincoln Project brought in. Oh, they fell on their feet just fine. Just fine. All right, so here's Nicole Wallace warning her viewers about what might happen if Trump wins.
I've seen that toast a bunch of times, but it landed very differently this year because depending on what happens in November, 7 months from right now, this time next year, I might not be sitting here. There might not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner or a free press. While our democracy doesn't exactly fall apart immediately without it, the real threat looms larger. A candidate with outward disdain, not just for a free press, but for all of our freedoms and for the rule of law itself.
For the rule of law itself. Nicole, first of all, touch up the roots. Sorry, I had to say it. I'm petty. I'm not beneath that, but she does. She needs to touch up the roots. Number one. Number two, if you're trying to tell me that electing Donald Trump means that you no longer have a show on MSNBC, and maybe even MSNBC itself gets shut down, you've sold me. You know, now that I think about it, you are a brilliant Republican political strategist, because that's a winning message right there. But number three, and throw in that there will be no more White House Correspondents' Dinner. Please. I want Trump for life, if those are the conditions. But number three, and most importantly, if you really are concerned about the free press, if you really are concerned about the First Amendment, if you really are concerned about government control of the messages that you're allowed to receive, and publications, voices like ours here at Town Hall and everybody else on the platform that you're watching right now have a free, unencumbered ability to deliver the news and opinion directly to you. If that really is your concern, just look at recent memory. We've got two presidents, two administrations, two people. Which one of them has the best record right now when it comes to stifling free speech, when it comes to censoring the media, when it comes to pressuring social media companies to delete people's accounts and suspend them from being able to send and receive information? I mean, last I checked, it was Team Biden and the deep state operatives who supported Joe Biden, who worked directly with Twitter and with Facebook and with YouTube and with Google to silence people and shut people up. It was those guys who lied to keep the Hunter Biden story from taking off, who engineered the whole, this is a Russian propaganda operation about Hunter Biden's laptop 3 weeks before the election. They're the ones who censored and deleted the story from the New York Post on social media and bullied and pressured other media outlets from picking up the Hunter Biden story that the New York Post had. If you're really worried about the First Amendment, you know what, Nicole? It is a pretty clear choice between Trump and Biden. Because Biden's the one who's been stifling the media, stifling free speech, stifling the truth. But we've got one more meltdown, and it's a beautiful one. It's from old lizard head there, serpent head, James Carville. And he's got a message for the youth of America. Remember how we've been talking this whole show today about how Democrats and leftists' objections to the protests on college campuses are really rooted in the fact that they know they're going to lose, that they know that this is stacked up to destroy their party and Joe Biden. We're talking landslide for Trump if this stuff continues, everything that we're seeing. Well, James Carville knows his stuff. And he's got a message for these protesters. He's got a message for young people who are not real happy about Joe Biden right now.
Are you kidding me? Is this the United States of America? Is this the nation that was founded on the principle that no person is above the law? And then you tell these young people, if you don't get involved right now in this election, they're going to be involved in your life for the rest of your freaking life. And if Trump and Roberts and Alito and Gorsuch and Thomas and Leonard Leo and the Heritage Foundation, if they get a hold, there will be no government left. There will be no rights left. You'll live under theocracy. You'll end up with Christian nationalism. But that's all right, you little fucking 26-year-old. You don't feel like the election's important to me. They're not addressing the issues that I care about. Well, the New York Times story about the Harvard Youth Poll, which is a pretty good, well-regarded thing, a guy named John Della Volpe. And very recently, they gave youngsters the 15 most important issues. Clocking in at number 14 was student debt. You wouldn't know that if you read the press. Number 15 was the issue of Palestine. High on the list was abortion, was interest rates, was housing affordability, well, all of these other things. You are being insufficiently served by the commentariat, and to some extent, you're being insufficiently served through democratic messages. So my advice to tell these young people to get off your motherfucking ass and go vote, because you should vote like your entire future and the entire future of this United States depends on it, because quite frankly, it does. And that's not an exaggeration.
I mean, I promised you meltdowns, didn't I? But is that not? I want to play that on a loop as I'm going to sleep. I want that embedded in my cerebral cortex. During my REM sleep, I want that echoing in and out of my brain over and over again. God, that's beautiful. Honestly, I mean, I thought for a moment there, I felt like this is what I assume it's like to go to an OnlyFans page. It was almost that ecstatic. And also kind of dirty. Very dirty. How beautiful is that? Also, it's all the lie. You know, this is the guy whose claim to fame for the Bill Clinton campaign is it's the economy, stupid. Right? This is the guy. He knows what it takes to win a presidential election. He's done it twice. Okay? And he knows that when you're running as an incumbent, the most important question to ask is that great question Ronald Reagan asked in 1980 after 4 years of Jimmy Carter, which actually looks like a walk in the park compared to 4 years of Joe Biden. The question for everyone when you're judging an incumbent is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? That's not James Carville's message today. No, because he knows that if you ask that question, it's game over. He can't tout anything about the economy, stupid, because he knows how bad it is. So all they've got now is, you don't vote, we lose, then our democracy is over as we know it. Did you see how seamlessly, by the way, he pivoted from a conversation about our election and who wins the presidency, and he immediately said, and then Roberts and Alito and Thomas and the Heritage Foundation, then they're gonna be in charge. I hate to break this to you, but no matter who wins the White House, Thomas and Roberts and Alito and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, they're still going to be on the Supreme Court. But see, they so politicize the Supreme Court and the judicial system that they think of it ingrained into a presidential election. Because that's how they think. That's their perspective. By the way, I'm only sorry that town hall media didn't make the list. Guys, we are falling down on the job. When he mentions Heritage Foundation, the next thing out of his mouth should be town hall, Red State, Hot Air, PJ Media, Bearing Arms, Twitchy, especially those lunatics at Twitchy. We're going to step it up. It's an election year. We're going to make his list next time. Those are beautiful meltdowns. They're wonderful. They're gorgeous. They're incredible to behold. And as you see them, it's fun to watch. And it's fun to point out exactly how they manipulate you and the media. The most important thing to bear in mind as you see this is for their base and for some voters, that crap actually works. And that's why we stick together. We keep our eyes on the important issues that are in front of us. We focus, and we don't lose our focus. We keep our concentration. And we're going to see each other through this election, you and I together. And speaking of this election coming up, who do you think the Democrats' nominee for president is going to be? And I mean that question incredibly sincerely, because the more you see Joe Biden, the more it seems unlikely that he stays at the top of the ticket for a couple of reasons. The first is because he's just mentally and physically incapable of doing it. But the second reason is because as every day goes by and we see the events in our country develop and we see the polls, he's going to get just demolished. It's going to be ugly. And that's when Barack Obama and Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice and the real powers that be in the Democratic Party and the institutionalized deep state left in this country, that's when they start doing something. And one of the options is Joe resigns, Kamala takes over. And then she rides this wave of history as the first Black woman president. That's a very real scenario. But there's one problem standing in the way. Black voters who they're counting on here with the Kamala. One of the reasons you do the Kamala Harris move is to solidify the Black vote and act because it's like Barack Obama all over again. It's history, baby. And Black voters actually hate her. I mean, they hate her. Jesse Waters will explain.
Joe Biden took Kamala off ice today, sending her to Atlanta to pitch their economic opportunity tour, which are really just Trump's opportunity zones that they plagiarized. Kamala is telling Black voters, reelect Joe, and we'll pump cash into your neighborhoods. This may actually help with her name recognition, considering the Black voters Johnny talks to can't even pick her out of a lineup.
Who's this? I don't know. Who is that?
I know she's a Black woman.
I don't know who that is.
Who the hell is that?
How's Kamala doing?
Kamala
Harris, dude. How proud are you of Kamala Harris?
All she does is laugh.
What has she done for my community?
Kamala Harris loves her electric buses.
We don't need that, Kamala. She loves a lot of things. She don't love her people.
Democrats know Kamala's a hot mess, but they're stuck with her. They need to get it together. I mean, not a book plug, but they need to. The DNC tested Kamala with focus groups to figure out why she's unlikable. Turns out it's this.
And then I have a follow-up on Afghanistan.
Okay.
Think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Some people understand what I'm talking about.
That cackle's hard to handle, but Kamala doesn't care. She is leaning into it.
You were asking me earlier about what it means to be like the first woman. And, you know, it's funny because people still got to get used to this, right? I mean, my staff, for example, sometimes they'll show me little things that just amuse me. Like apparently some people love to talk about the way I laugh.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I love your laugh.
Well, let me just tell you something. I have my mother's laugh. Oh. And I grew up around a bunch of women in particular who laughed from the belly. You know, I'm never going to be, that's just, I'm not that person.
See what you did there? Hating Kamala's laugh, sexist. But don't worry, they're hard at work rebranding Kamala for the 19th time.
We all need a mom. I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now.
Yeah.
But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country. We need a great protector.
A Mamala. I have so much to say about this. But first of all, on the laugh, I just want to point out, and I don't know if you've seen her before, her name is Esty Palti. She has absolutely perfected a Kamala Harris impersonation. And you've got to say, because the only upside to Kamala Harris staying in public view is that this woman has got a huge career ahead of her. Watch.
Everything is in context. You know, I have a great joke. Don't Don't kill me for this one. You're going to be holding your stomachs. But my mother used to say to me, I don't understand what's wrong with you people. You think you fell out of a coconut tree? Right? So, right. So the context. Coconuts. No? Montel like them.
I'm sorry. I love her so much. She's especially the laugh. Hold on, one more.
A Kamala Harris riddle. Let's go. Today is today. And yesterday was today yesterday. Tomorrow will be today tomorrow. So live today. So the future today will be as the past today as it is tomorrow. And what the did I just say?
I'm sorry. I just can't get enough of her. So that's the laugh. And Jesse lays it out there very well. And yes, this appearance on Drew Barrymore, what's with the laugh? Oh, that's my mother's laugh. Oh, that's so amazing. This is the beginning of the process that I truly do believe is going to lead to Joe Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris taking over. If this works. See, they're beginning it now. If her numbers start to rise, if this whole PR offensive actually starts to build, then that's when the tap on the shoulder to Joe. Listen, if people just continue to hate her and it's not moving anywhere, then they're just going to ride Joe out as far as they can, or maybe that's when they, throw in Michelle. I don't know. I know one thing. They need to stay in power. That's all they've got. When they're out of power, they've got nothing. And the last thing they want is is Donald Trump to go in there. So this interview with Drew Barrymore was really the beginning of this new offensive to start addressing all of the things about Kamala Harris that people don't like, and do it in a friendly setting. This is how these PR people think. This is how these comms people. Don't worry, Drew Barrymore's going to be great. And you can talk about the laugh, and you can say that when you attack me, you're being sexist because you're not used to a woman up there. Why is it all of the women who end up being politicians have this horrible cackle, like Hillary and now Kamala? You know why? Because they're not genuine. Nobody actually laughs like that for real. They're pretending. I'm relatable. Look at me laughing. And that's all they got. But I want to go back to this Mamala thing that she tried. Here's an extended cut of this conversation about how our country needs a hug. And you can be our mommy. And we need a Mamala. Kamala the Mamala. Watch.
However, we need a great protector.
Yeah. Well, part of it is I think that sadly over the last many years, there's been this kind of perverse approach to what strength looks like, which is to suggest that the measure of one's strength is based on who you beat down. Instead of what we know, the true measure of your strength is based on who you lift up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if you ever want to measure, if you ever just want some indication, objective indication of your individual power, see what you can do to help other people in need. And it could be just a simple act.
Yes.
Including just taking some interest in actually listening.
Yes.
Oh, God. To think that I was hot for Drew Barrymore at one point in my youth. I'm so re-examining all of my life choices now. What has happened to her? I'm going to go watch Charlie's Angels again and sort of purge myself of this new Drew Barrymore. Yes. Here's the thing about this whole we need healing, we need a hug, we need nurture, we need to be lifted up. You have been beating us down. You have been beating us to a pulp for the last decade. If we opposed Barack Obama's un-American destructive policies, we were immediately called a racist. And then we might as well have a hood on. Because you can't oppose a black president with bad ideas. No. It's not because of his ideas. It's because of the color of his skin. It's your inherent racism. We've been told what words we can use, what language we can use. We've been told what we're allowed to think and what we're not allowed to think. We've been told that if we object to a fully male, biologically intact dude walking into a women's restroom or locker room and salivating over the naked women there, if we've been told that as we're trying to protect our daughters and put some sort of societal basic cultural norm back into our society, that we're the problem, that we're the hate mongers, that we're phobic in some way and a bigot, we've been told that if we think a nation deserves to protect its borders and not allow millions of criminals to cross into our country, stealing our jobs and going to our schools that we pay for, that in some way we're xenophobic, protectionist bigots. If we're told that we think maybe we might want to have a change, and instead of hiring Hillary Clinton to be our president, who has 30 years of lying, deceitful, corrupt behavior under her belt, and we want to try something new with a successful businessman in the White House to actually sort of jumpstart our economy and our society, and we've been told if we want to do that, we're deplorable. We've been told that because we object to wearing a mask or getting a vaccine that the government is forcing on us that has not been properly tested, that if we want our children to go back in school since they're not vulnerable to the virus and we want to go back to work, we've been told that because we dare to say that China's responsible for the virus because it came from the same city where there's a lab that looks at viruses. We've been told that we're xenophobic and hateful mongers and we're going to kill our grandmother and kill our society because we don't believe science if we believe those things. You've spent the last 10 to 20 years telling us all of that and beating us down, othering us and telling us that we're what's wrong with our country. And now you dare to say that we need a hug? You dare to say that we need mothering? And by the way, the mother that we need is this woman, Kamala Harris? Yeah, I don't need a hug. I don't want a hug. I get a hug from people that I get a hug from. You want a hug? You get a hug from your wife. You get a hug from your husband. You get a hug from your mother or your father or from your children or your best friends, your pals, your fellas. That's what you get from a hug. I don't want that from a president. I don't want a hug from a president. I want a leader. I want a strong leader who can put our country back on its path. I want a strong leader who will not hug our enemies in foreign lands, but instill the fear of God in them. You want to know why we haven't had a female president up until now? Because of that, what you just saw. I want you to be our mamala. I don't want our president to be our mother or our father. We've had one father of this country. Long gone. But did you hear, though, right in the middle of that, where she said, oh, there's been this fake idea of strength where it's supposed to be how you can beat the other person down instead of lifting people up, right? First of all, last I checked, Joe Biden spending a lot of time beating me down and beating you down, you MAGA fascist insurrectionist. But this whole beating the other guy down instead of lifting the other person up, that is one of these scripted, rehearsed, test-marketed, focus grouped, approved kind of lines that reeks of Kamala Harris phoniness. It's the reason why people don't like her. It has nothing to do with her sex. It has nothing to do with her race. It might have something to do with her coming from California. But most of it is because we know she's fake. We know she's a fraud. From the laugh down to the policies, down to the rehearsed and scripted lines. That's who she is. That's all she's ever been. You want proof? Here's a little proof.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been, what we can see, what we believe can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. Who we can be, unburdened by who we have been. What can be.
I want you to know that this goes on for another 3 minutes. It's a great montage put together by the folks at the RNC. And it's the same line over and over again. In fact, and not just the same line, but I'm sure you've seen it, the hand gestures. It's all the same. Oh, this time she didn't do the hand gesture. Wait for it, though. Can be unburdened by what has been. Can be unburdened by what has been. Can be what has been. Can be what has been. Can be what has been. It's over and over again. It's uncanny. It's frightening, actually. It's terrifying. It's Kamala Harris. You know, when all is said and done, you know, the idea that she's the first Black woman president is a huge deal. And Lord knows she's smarter than all of us, right? I mean, she's brilliant. She's a transcendent figure. There's so many, and she's so genuine, and she's so funny. But honestly, I think what I love most about Kamala Harris, it's got to be her authenticity. We're not worthy of having a leader, a mamala like Kamala Harris, a person like this in our life. I personally, for one, I'm going to reflect on how fortunate we might be if she deigns to ascend to the throne of the White House and rule over all of us, her subjects. I'm going to sit and ponder that reality for a bit as I consider what has been, unburdened by what. Oh, I did it wrong, didn't I? That's right. I'm sorry. This is why I'm not Kamala Harris. I'm going to sit and ponder what can be, unburdened by what has been. No doubt you've heard me mention the Electronic Payments Coalition. They're the ones who are engaged in the fight right now over the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This is the bill that, if passed and signed into law, will basically eliminate credit card rewards, all those rewards that we enjoy, that we utilize, that we've grown accustomed to, that are working. So, of course, Congress wants to come in and break it. Well, let's bring in the leader of the fight there, Richard Hunt, tip of the spear on this important and vital fight in the Senate. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Larry, good day to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish we didn't have to keep talking about this. I wish it would go away, but it's still lingering. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. Personally, you know, I don't want to drag you into partisan politics. I don't expect a whole lot from Dick Durbin, but I know Senator Marshall. He's a pretty good man. Why are they doing this? What are they thinking?
Yeah, look, we're very disappointed in both Senators Durbin and Senator Marshall. Obviously, Senator Marshall, a Republican from Kansas, usually anti-government mandate type of senator. Not in this case. He has teamed up not only with Dick Durbin, but also now the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Department of Transportation to try to lower the transaction costs for Kroger and Amazon and, say, Walmart. The big merchants are the ones who are driving this bill. Look, Larry, we don't like how much we have to pay for a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk. But, you know, you get a great benefit and a great service when both the merchant and the consumer uses their credit card. There aren't many things we feel more confident about than when we use our credit card. That's going to be safe, is going to be secure. The merchant gets automatic payment. We get to have our good or product delivered to us right away. And yes, we get a benefit called reward miles, reward points for many people. Some people use those miles to see their loved ones, but the vast majority of people use those rewards for cash back, especially around back to school time and also around the holidays in December. But we saw what happened, Larry, in 2010 when Senator Durbin did this to debit cards. You may remember the day, Larry, on debit cards, you had reward points. Guess what happened in 2010 when the United States government, because of Dick Durbin, lowered this interchange price? Goodbye, adios, say goodbye to your reward points. Yep. Now they're trying to do to the credit card what they did to the debit card. But Larry, look, this has gone on too long now. Now, because they can't get it passed in Congress, they turn to Joe Biden and his administration and the government agencies. And today, And next week, there will now be a hearing at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to investigate reward points. So they have now what I call jumped the shark. You may remember that phrase. Since they can't win in Congress, now they're going to the administration.
You mentioned, first of all, I do know a lot of the stuff that you just laid out there and about what happened with the debit card bill because I've been to handsoffmyrewards.com, really informative website that you've set up. You mentioned the Department of Transportation. What business is it of the Department of Transportation about how credit cards are transacted at a grocery store or at a big box store? This is obviously in some way targeting the airline industry. What is that all about?
So, Larry, I'm from Louisiana, and we think we play pretty dirty when it comes to politics. But Chicago and Illinois, they beat the heck out of us. So as soon as Dick Durbin saw that his two major airlines that he used to praise lavishly were opposed to his bill, he turned his sights on them. We call it the Durbin-Marshall Political Retribution Tour of 2024. We always hear about these stories, how privileged senators use their power to go after their so-called enemies. This is exactly what happened. As soon as United and American and some other airlines came out publicly in opposition to this bill, he turned on them. So he's taken a Chicago-style politics to Washington, D.C. I've never seen a United States senator, or both of them, because Roger Marshall was in bed with them. I've never seen two politicians like this turn their fire on American companies just because they oppose them.
So it's the Chicago way, right, from the Untouchables. David Mamet is writing this script, except David Mamet's a good guy. Well, listen, we know how we're going to be affected. You take away our rewards, you take away our cash back, you take away our airline miles. That's devastating for the way we live our lives right now and what we've been counting on. How is this going to affect the airline industry? It's not an industry that can take a lot of hits right now.
Yeah, not too long ago, all the airports in South Carolina wrote a letter to their senators, Graham and Tim Scott, saying if this bill were to pass, it would affect airline travel to all the 5 major airports in South Carolina. And that is happening across the country. Some 15 million people, Larry, just last year used miles to travel. So that may be to travel for the holidays, to see loved ones, to take a vacation, family emergencies happen. But not only do you fly, obviously, but you rent cars, you stay at hotels, and you go eat out at restaurants. The restaurants complain a lot about how much they have to pay in credit card services, benefits. But I tell you what, Larry, if this bill passed, their fees will come down because you know what? Less people will eat out. A lot of Americans eat out these days because of loyalty, reward points. That's a way to create loyalty and attractive to the restaurants. That would have a huge effect on the entire industry in this country.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, and I can speak from personal experience because I am into these rewards that I get from my credit card. When it's time to make even basic purchases, let alone a big ticket purchase, I'll go through the special website for shopping online that my credit card has set up to maximize those points. I get extra bonuses when I buy through their portal. This is a thing that people do. So I'm just curious exactly how does this work? For those who haven't been to handsoffmyrewards.com, why does the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill directly affect consumers and our rewards? People maybe aren't putting 2 and 2 together about how this thing that they claim is about fees for credit card transactions at the store. How does that then affect my rewards?
Yeah, Larry, excellent point. So you go back to 2010, as we talked about. What happened then is the United States government dictated how much we could charge for providing a service. I talked about my gallon of gas, my gallon of milk. I would like it to be lower as well, but I don't want the government telling companies how much they can charge for their product. That's what happens in this bill. This bill will mandate that your credit card must be processed by companies that do not exist today because Visa and MasterCard have invented, they have perfected, and they protect your credit card. But they would have to turn over their technology to a company that does not exist to process the transaction of your credit card from the Visa or MasterCard network. Think about, Larry, how ludicrous what I just said was. Why doesn't Coca-Cola turn over their secret formula to Pepsi? That's what this would entail. So people would get less revenue, the payment companies would get less revenue. They're going to have to cut costs somewhere, just like they did in 2010. And one of those, entities that will go away or significantly be reduced would be your reward points. No doubt about it. If you reduce revenue, you got to cut expenses somewhere, and this is what would happen.
Listen, Richard, I want people to educate themselves on this, but I also want them to sort of know both sides of the argument, just so they can make up their own mind. I trust the American people. I trust citizens to be able to hear this stuff. So according to the proponents of the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill, that this is going to take away our rewards, they claim that ultimately this is in service of the consumer. They claim that the American people and consumers, they're going to benefit from this. But flesh that out for me here. How are they wrong?
So when they said the same thing in 2010, they said they would take the savings from the new interchange rate and they would rebate that back to the consumer in the form of lower prices. But we've had two major studies, one from the Federal Reserve Board of Richmond, who said that did not happen, that they kept the money. Home Depot said in their earnings report in 2013, the CFO said this. She said, we're going to make some $30 million off of lower interchange prices. Home Depot kept the money. Then recently, the Congressional Research Service, which is the mother of all independent research in the United States and in Washington, D.C., and who Congress relies on, said there's no evidence that consumers would get any type of reduction based upon the interchange reduction. It's just a big deal for Walmart and Amazon to lower their interchange rates and be able to keep the money. Look, had they returned the money in 2010 like they said they would, I would not be here because this bill probably would have passed by now. But they kept the money, Larry.
That sounds like the classic bait and switch, man. You can't do that. Go ahead and pass this. We're going to save this money. We'll pass it on to you. Then they pass it, they save the money, and they keep it. That's literally a bait and switch. So,
and what's worse, Larry, is they're coming back for more.
Well, sure. Hey, it worked the first time, right? I mean,
yes.
Dwight Dillinger kept going to the banks. That's where the money is.
That's where the money is, right?
Richard, what real fast, because you just suggested that they already know how unpopular this is, I think partly because we've been drawing attention to it. So now they're trying to get this unelected bureaucracy to just sort of do it through mandates instead of actually voting on it. Well, that's a squirrely way. And again, you put the words government mandate into the same sentence, and it's just a failure. It never works out well for us. So what's this next step for them, and how can we stop it?
Yeah, so look, they're going to the CFPB. And what's interesting about this, Larry, Senator Marshall despises the CFPB until when? It was to his benefit. Then all of a sudden, he said, hey, CFPB, we need your help now, although he thought they were unconstitutional. So look, they tried to pass a law. Senators said no. But don't get me wrong, Larry, they're still trying to again. They're about to try on the FAA bill that's coming up for debate this week. They're going to try again on the National Defense Authorization Act, which comes out in probably 2 months. So while they can't win there yet, they're going to go to the United States government executive branch. And that's what they're trying to do with the CFPB and Department of Transportation. So look, we're fighting a two-pronged war now, Congress and the administration. Hands off myrewards.com. We've had over some 3 million letters sent to the United States Congress. Now we're trying to also look at the administration to make sure they do not touch your rewards as well, or the government mandates. So look, your data is paramount to you. When you swipe that card, you have faith that Visa and MasterCard and all of our banks in this country and credit unions are going to have the mechanisms that are safe and secure. This bill, if it passes, it's to save a few cents on each transaction for Amazon and Home Depot and Walmart. They don't care about your security like the rest of America does.
Boy, outrageous. And isn't it so ironic? They're going to the CFPB, as you mentioned. People don't know what that is. That's Elizabeth Warren's brainchild. She came up with it back when she was, even before she was a senator. This was all her idea. And of course, it's all about the people and it's a populist thing. And who are they benefiting? Walmart and Amazon. It's outrageous. Yeah. Well, listen, I love that we're working together to try to bring awareness to people so that they know what is going on and just how insidious it is. And one more time, just to send the final message here, where do you want people to go so that they can do something about this? They can actually notify their own senator to make sure they know how unhappy they are.
Yeah, your senators and your members of the House of Representatives, hands off myrewards.com, hands off myrewards.com. Don't let Congress take your rewards from you. Look, when politicians choose, Americans lose.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate you fighting this fight on this one, all the government mandates that we all hate. You're actually fighting them for us, and we appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Larry.
That's it for today. Come on back tomorrow, same time, same place. Share this video far and wide so everybody can see Kamala Harris's great cackle. I mean, after all, it's, oh my God, is she still?
Can be unburdened by what has been.
She can't
what
stop.
Can be unburdened by what has been. See what can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Unburdened by what has been and knowing what can be.
Have a sense of vision about what can be unburdened by what has been.
To see what can be
Unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
All right, well, we're just going to let her keep going. I'm going to be a little sick. I honestly, what angers me most about that, because it is funny, but I actually get angry because they think we're so stupid that we don't notice this. Especially with the... That's it for today. Share this around if you can, especially the segments that we're going to break out and put out later. I think that there's some pretty good stuff in today's show, and we want all your friends to see it as well. We'll be back next time. Thanks for watching. In the meantime, I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me